Hey everyone, it is the 24th of May 2014 and welcome to the second episode of THINGCAST, the semi-regular live hangout where I just talk about random things that I'm looking at the moment. Please forgive me if I'm a little scattered or I had to literally leave in the middle of this cast because it turns out my sister has decided that today is the day that she's going to give birth to I'm going to be an uncle, so to a baby girl, and so I might have to run off in the middle of the cast once the hospital lets us know that we can go visit her. But in that time, we do have some time to talk about some really cool stuff. We can talk about the Surface Pro 3. We're going to talk about the Sony NW-ZX1 and also the XBA-H3 balanced armature hybrid earphones, which are just right here. So we're going to have something to talk about. As always, you can pop into the question and answer application to leave a question, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that you have about any of the stuff we're talking about. And also at the end, I'll kind of open it up to just kind of general questions. But anyway, yes, the Surface Pro 3, I clearly don't have a Surface Pro 3 review unit. I've noticed that a lot of people, a lot of very lucky YouTube viewers in the US have gotten their hands on a review unit, which is really exciting. There's also, you know, when I watched the Surface Pro 3 launch video, which you've seen, I had a pretty positive reaction because basically every single thing that I thought was an issue with the original Surface Pro 2, I felt was being resolved in the Surface Pro 3, which is really kind of exciting. Now, there is a lot of trepidation, I guess, in the community about the switch from the Wacom stylus to the N-Trig stylus, because now they've dropped from 1024 levels of sensitivity to 256. And that's obviously going to be an issue, but more than that, I've heard some good initial reports saying that the N-Trig stylus really does have more accurate tracking with the pen tip on the glass surface, especially around the edges. And to me, along with reduced lag, there's apparently reduced lag when you draw on it. Those kind of things also, I think, will improve the drawing experience. So I guess it depends on how you draw. I think for normal kind of basic sketches, 256 levels of sensitivity are going to be fine, right? For pencil emulation, that kind of thing. I think for paint strokes, kind of brush strokes, where you want to be able to have a good shape when you're making the actual stroke, and that shape will depend on how hard you're pressing on the pen. Less sensitivity levels are obviously going to be an issue. So again, we can't know till we've actually had the thing in our hands. The artist from Penny Arcade recently tweeted about it. He has a Surface Pro 3 review unit, so I think a lot of people are kind of watching out for that to know. Sorry, I've just got a little interruption because I believe we may have a special guest on the screen. Let me just, I'm just going to dip into the chat. If we do, then we might move on to the next topic. Yes, sorry, just a little second here while okay, sorry. Okay. I don't really have that much to talk about with the Surface Pro 3. If you have any particular questions, just give me a yell. But I'm very excited. I'm still tossing up at the moment between getting a MacBook Air and a Surface Pro 3. I may end up getting both and then just making the comparison and then selling the remaining one because you know, to be completely honest, a lot of people ask me how do I get the money to afford this kind of gear. I don't actually, you know, I don't actually make a great deal of money out of these YouTube videos. And to be completely honest, the only products that I've ever reviewed on this channel, apart from review units, I guess, but the only products where I bought them and I reviewed on this channel, the only ones that have ever covered the cost of purchasing them were the Surface Pro type covers and the touch covers, because I made those videos and the ad revenue I got from people watching those videos was enough to cover the purchase price of those products. Apart from that, basically nothing else, no headphone that I've looked at has gotten enough views where I've actually been able to pay for the actual product itself. So But I do get enough ad revenue from certain products where if I were to resell them after buying them and the depreciation was not too bad, I haven't made a great deal of loss. So from my perspective, uh, it's a good way for me to figure out exactly what I want to use, and it actually helps me make the videos and have a useful opinion about them as well. So that's basically kind of it. Okay, so let's move on. I think we should talk about the next thing we should talk about. Actually, I'm just trying to. What I have is actually a very special guest on the Hangout at the moment. But I don't believe that he actually has a microphone. Oh, I don't believe he can actually talk. So he may have just ended up. He's in the room. Oh, okay. So well. For those of you who are curious, I have Mike from, also known as Hi-Fi Guy 528 on YouTube, just watching this stream with us. So if you've got any questions to ask Mike, you can also kind of jump in there and ask him as well. He just told me that I should probably get some beats, and he says hello to everyone. And I am looking at considering getting that Beats wireless. Oh, we also have the Warren from Audio 360 joining us. I do not know if he has a microphone. Warren, do you have a microphone? My apologies for not like. He's like, I just threw the link up on Facebook, and so they're kind of hopping on. Hopefully, some of them have a microphone and they want to jump in on the actual talking side of things. But if you have any questions for the Audio 360 guys, just pop them into the Q&A. Anyway, okay, so let's move on, since this is the next thing that's going to be probably really exciting for a lot of people. It is the ZX1. So this is the 35th anniversary Sony Walkman, which I unboxed in an earlier video, just yesterday, I think. And I've been having a chance to kind of play around with it, and I can give you some initial impressions about the way this device works, particularly just in terms of music management, that kind of thing. What I did was the first thing I did was I just chucked on a huge number of lossless files. I had 90 gigs of lossless music to chuck onto this, so that took about 2 hours to transfer. So one thing that I would comment is I wish this thing had USB 3 if the file transfer was faster, because 2 hours to transfer all that music. I mean, 128 gig audio player is huge, and it's really cool to have that amount of storage, but it does take a while to transfer, to do that initial transfer. And to be honest, I'm not a really big fan of just dragging and dropping music onto a player. Oh, sorry. There you go, physical music controls, I accidentally pressed one. I'm not a huge fan of just dragging and dropping, because with my iPhone, I've got it all set up so that it's synchronized properly. And what I do when I listen to music is I have two playlists on my iPhone. I have one playlist which is stuff I've added in the last 2 months, and then another playlist which is 4- and 5-star rated songs. So I have new songs on a new playlist, and then when I listen to them, I go, oh, I kind of like this song, or I don't like this song. If I like the song, then I'll open up the song when it's playing, and then I'll just add a star rating, right? And then I can be sure that next time I sync it back, it'll remember that that song has a star rating, and therefore I want to keep that on the iPhone. So it will keep those two synchronized, and that's a really elegant system. It's really powerful. It's using a lot of smart playlists, and that's what I really like about using the iPhone and iTunes as a music player. I don't know if that facility exists so much on the Android player, especially in regards to synchronization with Macintosh computer, because clearly I synchronize this with my music library on my iMac, and so far the only way I can work it out is to just drag and drop. I could also use the Double Twist music player to synchronize, but the stupid thing about Double Twist on the Mac is that it automatically transcodes lossless files into lossy files, which is clearly not what I want if I want to make the best use of this $500 audio player. As far as the music interface goes, well, let's just talk about the physical aspects of the machine itself. It is such a beautifully designed piece of hardware. It looks absolutely just gorgeous. Some people asked about the big hump on the back. That's meant to be a a big hump for the amplifier components to ensure a more stable power supply. I don't know too much about Class D amplifiers and that kind of thing, but I do know the way Class D amplifiers work, and this is from discussions with Tom Tsai from SimbaCarbon.com. The way Class D amplifiers work is that they require really stable power circuitry so that the switching noise, and they're called a Class D amplifier, and it means a digital amplifier, and that means is that power delivery is constantly switching between off and on, right? It's not analog in that there are levels of power delivery that can be adjusted. This one is there are several power delivery kind of MOSFETs, they're called, and they're all switched on and off like a binary 0-1 kind of thing. And for that system to avoid distortion and noise, you have to have very stable power circuitry going to the MOSFETs, as I understand it. That's why the ZX1 has this giant hump on the back, and these big, like this, very cool, amazing looking headphone jack here, just chunky, and it looks the business. So just in terms of pure physicality, I love the feel of it. The music controls on the right are just fantastic. I love actually being able to adjust the song without having to turn the screen on, which is just really cool. And as you can hear, it's got a little speaker on the back. One criticism I have of the actual physical design is that the screen is quite reflective, and I'm used to using, on the iPhone and on modern day, like really nice smartphones nowadays, the display is actually bonded to the glass. So there's no air gap between the glass and the LCD, and you get a reduced reflection, you get a stronger, punchier color, and it just looks overall better. On the ZX1, it's still the style of an older screen, so you can actually see that there's an air gap between the display. It's not quite as nice, I guess, especially for a flagship product. I would have liked to see had they kind of been able to do that bonding technique. The other thing about the actual display, or the actual components of the ZX1, the music application, I'll just show you the music application. So we have all these albums here. My main problem with this music app, so you can see all the album art here, is that when you scroll really fast, as you can see, everything disappears off the screen because it's not loading the album art fast enough, and it's also not loading the titles of the songs fast enough. And there's also no visual indicator where you are on the index, the alphabetical index from A to Z. So if I scroll really fast, I have to kind of guess that I want to end up at a certain album, which is kind of really annoying. If you compare to the if you compare with the iPhone user interface, so these are all the albums. Let me just turn up the brightness so you can see that. These are all the albums. But you can see that no matter how fast I scroll, every single album loads up. Visually, I can navigate this instantly. There's also an A to Z index on the side of the iPhone that I can instantly jump to a letter of the alphabet. So it's very, very smooth, very, very fast. That's not quite the same on the ZX1. Unfortunately, it's still not as good, I think, in terms of navigation as iOS in terms of the music player. And as you can see, I've got a lot of the album art missing because some of the way the album art is structured is missing from the transfer. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to put that back on. But just yeah, it's still really good. I think it's still easy to use interface. It's just not as well thought out. And the other problem is that I suspect that the actual hardware on the ZX1 is not as fast as the one on the iPhone. So it doesn't. There's a little bit of lag when you just scroll through. I mean, obviously you're not going to do this all day, but there is a little bit of lag when you're scrolling through the music library. Some of the response times are a little kind of slow, I reckon. It's not a deal breaker, and I think it's probably pretty good for like an audiophile grade player, considering how many of those have terrible UIs. But it's still not at the level of refinement that I would like to see in a sorry, I'm being distracted by Warren and Michael kind of saying that they want to make me laugh. It's still not at the level of kind of refinement that I would like to see from a flagship kind of player. So it would be nice to have a bit more of that kind of thing. That said, there's some really cool features that I haven't really had a chance to play around with on the Walkman. There's a lot of in particular sound settings that I'll just bring up that will maybe make more sense. So we have this clear audio option, which actually sounds terrible with everything I've tried it so far. I think it was specifically intended to be used with a pack-in pair of earphones, but the ZX1 doesn't come with a pack-in pair, so it just kind of sounds terrible. But there's also a hardware equalizer, which is really always useful. There's the Sony Clear Bass function, which is actually quite good, actually, because Clear Bass, as far as I understand it, is an equalizer that lets you add more bass, but it's programmed so that it doesn't just increase the level. It intelligently works out where you might actually end up peaking the signal and going into clipping distortion. So it prevents you from doing that. So you can add more bass, but it won't sound terrible because it won't cause the player to distort. So I played around with that for a bit. It actually works quite well. There's also some interesting surround sound settings that you can actually go and add various forms of reverb. And even though I'm not really like a fan of this kind of stuff, and I don't really know why you would use it, it's actually still fun because the studio option actually sounds like a studio. If you choose the concert hall, it actually sounds all weird like a concert hall. Very, very cool. There's things like the DSEE-HX, which is Sony claims that they use this to fill in the gaps from high frequency, from lossy compression. Basically, from everything I've read about DSEE, and each time it's been analyzed, DSEE turns out to be just like a glorified equalizer of all the high frequencies above 18 kilohertz. It just increases those frequencies. So, there's dynamic normalizer, which is just like sound check, X-Loud, clear phase. Those are just for the inbuilt speakers. So some obviously more controls over the way things sound than with an iPhone, which is really helpful for people who like using who like using equalizers. I don't like using equalizers personally, but this is obviously a really good music player just in terms of those kind of special things you can configure. The other thing about the ZX1 is that obviously it has a bunch of Wi-Fi and that kind of thing. I've just turned that all off and put it into airplane mode. I don't want to waste the battery, and I'm not going to use this to browse the internet because it's not going to be obviously as nice in terms of experience as an iPhone. And you're probably going to end up getting some form of harmonic noise or some kind of electrical noise from having those extra antennas turned on. So I've just turned them all off. Okay, so in terms of sound performance, I cannot say that I hear a huge difference between the iPhone and the ZX1. There are differences I think I can hear, but I'm really, really not sure because it's not. They're not volume matched, for one thing. There should actually be differences in sound. There's no question that these should sound different or not, because the iPhone has an output impedance of 3 ohms, whereas the ZX1 has a Class D amplifier, which basically means that it has a 0 ohm. Like the way that the implementation of the amplifier works on the ZX1, it should have a 0 ohm output impedance. And a lot of people have tried to measure the voltage coming out of the ZX1. It's actually impossible to do so because of the implementation. But basically, as I understand it, and I was told by Thomas, who knows more about these kind of things, it should have about a 0 ohm output impedance. But the other thing about the ZX1 coming out of the measurements, over at Sumal, which is a Chinese audio forum, they've done RMAA tests on the ZX1. And the result that they have gotten from the RMAA test is that the ZX1, because of the nature of Class D amplifiers, they produce quite a lot of switching noise distortion. The ZX1 actually does not have a signal-to-noise. It has a signal-to-noise ratio of about maximum 93 decibels. And that is quite poor for an audiophile music player. To put that in perspective, the iPhone has a signal-to-noise ratio of about 96 decibels, and or about 95 actually, according to the same. Now, when you compare to be clear, when you compare RMAA tests, you can only compare the result from one set of measurements and one set of source equipments, because RMAA results are dependent on the hardware that you use to measure it. So you cannot compare RMAA results from two different sources. But Sumo actually did a RMAA of the iPhone 5, and the result is that the iPhone 5 has a signal-to-noise ratio of about 95 decibels. And to be very clear, 16-bit audio CDs have a maximum dynamic range of 96 decibels, and 24-bit audio is even higher than that. So basically, what the RMAA test from Sumo indicates is that the ZX1 does not even have the dynamic range to take advantage of 16-bit audio, let alone 24-bit audio files. It can play them back without any sort of conversion, but the actual physical hardware cannot deliver a signal-to-noise ratio where it would be able to actually, you would not be able to hear the difference with 24-bit, because it's basically, there is a level of noise on the player which is not, it's going to cover or mask the actual advantage of having 24-bit audio, which is, as always, the reason why I keep saying 24-bit audio. Even if the player was 116 bits of dynamic range, you're going to get something else masking it when you go outside. So 24-bit audio is a bit of hogwash to me, as I've said repeatedly. When I actually compare them, as I said, when I do my final review, I actually ordered off eBay a little box that lets me do A/B switching really quickly. So I'm going to be able to do something, not quite a blind ABX test, but I'm at least going to be able to do an ABX, a good A/B comparison, and hopefully volume level 2, and be able to tell you some more differences between the sound. I think it sounds good. I can't argue with the fact that it sounds good. It really does sound good, but I can't say it necessarily sounds immediately better than my iPhone. That isn't to say that it sounds bad, because the iPhone and the iPod Touch 5G are some of the best audio players on the planet. If you've ever looked at the measurements, you will see that they are incredibly capable audio players. But yeah, no, we'll get into that as time goes on. Anyway, the last thing I wanted to talk about is the Sony XBA-H3, which I actually got a second-hand pair from a very nice gentleman who contacted me on my Facebook page from Latvia, and they've arrived in really good condition, and I've got to say I am very, very, very excited about these earphones. I am very, very impressed with the sound. First things first of all, when you put them on, though, you can see that they are ridiculous, just in terms of, you will get looks. I've gotten looks before wearing this in public, because they are just massive. They hang out of the ear. You get these massive ear guides, this black and red cable. It's unmistakable that you're wearing some sort of a crazy earphone. But yeah, I think that it's a little over chunky. I especially don't like the fact that this section here, as far as I understand, there should be no actual reason why this section is so chunky, because we had the dynamic driver and the two balanced armatures inside this cartridge. So it's not my favorite thing in terms of fit. It is quite lightweight, but I'm finding that sometimes on my left ear especially, I'm having trouble getting a seal. It just doesn't sit as securely as I would like. But I've got to say, in terms of sound, I am absolutely loving the H3. So for those of you who don't know, the H3 uses the liquid crystal polymer diaphragm technology from the EX1000, the EX700, etc., etc. But it also uses two balanced armatures. One of them is the full range from the XBA line, and the other one is a newly designed super kind of tweeter. So some of the things that really got me excited before I even ordered the H3 was that the preliminary measurements from some places coming out for the H3 indicate that the high frequency extension of the H3 is through the roof. It extends a lot compared to the EX1000. You actually get a lot more of the frequencies filled in above 15 kilohertz, and that's a lot of really kind of high frequency information that gives you a sense of air and space. And what I found is that in practice, this has some really lovely treble. And I'm surprised because I thought everyone was saying this was really smooth and dark and everything like that, and it is has a bit of a warm kind of lower bass kind of emphasis, but at the same time it has this really lovely textured kind of crunchy treble. It's just at the edge of what I would consider to be a little too much for my ears and my taste personally, but it's just at that edge. Most of the times I really love the kind of sheen to the sound. In terms of the bass, yeah, it's not. It has this kind of glossy presentation. The mid bass, I would say, in terms of male vocals, it actually seems a little bit recessed. It actually seems a little bit recessed, but in the kind of upper mid range, especially with female vocals or that kind of area, it seems a bit mid forward, which is an interesting thing. But overall, it has this really nice. It's definitely got a really strong kind of bass punch. When the bass is in the track, it makes itself heard. It's kind of blunt sounding almost in terms of the sub bass frequency, and it's not going to be a earphone for anyone who's after like a super neutral sound. But for me, I think it's really musical. It's really brilliant. I unequivocally can tell that I really like this earphone. It sounds really fantastic. And I'm glad I basically got this for about $230 essentially, which was a bargain to get this even secondhand. It was really good condition. I think the Amazon prices for the XBA-H3 recently I saw it dip to about 250. There was a sale, 250, 230 or something like that. That is a fantastic price. I would, as long as you are aware that this thing is huge. It may not fit your ear. It is massive and impractical. As long as you are aware of that, I think that the sound that you get for that price is fantastic. And I haven't heard anything that really makes me think of this kind of combination of really strong bass and really nicely textured treble. I haven't heard this kind of clarity from anything except for the Translucent OnePlus 2, which I had my doubts about in terms of being a $1,000 earphone in terms of build quality, but I don't have both to compare directly, but the H3 I feel like is the closest thing that I can remember in recent memory that brings me that level of clarity and at basically a quarter of the price. So the H3 is really really impressive. I think I'm really excited about this earphone, and I will be excited. This is basically the first earphone where I feel I'm gonna wait later when I get back home. I'm gonna actually try doing a blind ABX test with this earphone because I feel like the high frequency extension is good to the point where I may be able to tell the difference between. Don't quote me on this. I guess we'll see when the ABX test is performed, but I feel like I could use this earphone to determine the difference between 256K AAC and lossless. So I will be doing some experiments with that, and I will post the results up on the thing. But yeah, wow. Very exciting. But anyway, that's as far as the kind of topics I had to talk about and just kind of blab on about. So I'm just going to open it up to the question and answer. If you guys want to start leaving some questions about anything I've talked about or anything in general, I will give you some response. In the meantime, I'm going to just watch what Warren and Mike are doing in this channel.
Wait, hold on. Can anyone hear me?
Warren's asking, he can hear everything. He can hear me breathing, which makes the view switch over to you from offline all the time. Oh, right. No. What you're seeing is actually different from what the audience is seeing because you've actually ended up in the Q&A. Like you're actually in the Hangout. To be clear, you are not part of the audience. You're actually part of the people on the Hangout. So,
okay. Can anyone hear me right now?
If you talk, basically anyone can hear you, and I can switch the camera over to you if you want, so we can have the conversation. But basically, you are live at the moment. You've actually, when I gave you that link on Facebook, that was a link to join the Hangout. If you actually want to join the Q&A, you have to use the watch page link, which I sent earlier, and you jump in, and there's a Q&A link in the bottom left corner of the screen. I can't really hear you, no, because I think I turned down the volume on the thing so that I can't really. But if you want, we can have a conversation. It's Warren Chi, moderator at HeadFi, also writer at Audio 360, a all-round fantastic guy who I've never actually spoken to in person. So this might be interesting. Let's see if I can bring up the levels on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
On this, and again, if anyone has anything to say or in the question and answer, go ahead.
Okay, Lachlan, can you hear me?
So Warren's camera,
Lachlan?
being very mysterious, is just a blank wall. So just leave that on now.
No, my camera's
I think
probably
Warren,
not
your
gonna
camera
do it.
is already on, and it's just showing us a blank wall.
Yeah.
But I cannot hear you. So let me just work out what's I may actually need to plug in with a pair of earphones to actually be able to hear what's going on. But anyway, as always,
Yeah, which you should have on anyway.
You guys have been very quiet today, which is a bit of a surprise. And it makes me think I may have accidentally changed the setting inappropriately because no one is leaving any questions. Or maybe I'll just check the comment stream for now.
Okay, Lachlan, can you hear me?
Let's just change.
Can you hear me at all? Anything? This is Warren. Can you hear me?
Okay. So I cannot actually hear Warren, I believe.
Okay. All right. So
But
this is Warren.
That's okay. He's on the chat.
I hear Warren, but
Warren has recently. Warren's. Oh, there we go.
Okay. All right. Now can you hear me?
Who can hear me?
Okay, so there are some
I can hear
comments
you, Mike.
on the actual watch page, which
Lachlan
I should
can't hear
probably address. And it's that, do you find the iPhone is an adequate media player? Absolutely. This is a question from Matt Chu. I find the iPhone is more than capable as a media player. The things that I really don't like about the iPhone in terms of media playing, I had to say with the introduction of iOS 7, the fact that the album view now actually displays a lot less information on the screen at the same time, not a big fan of that change. That said, just in terms of the ease of use, the speed, the synchronization with the computer, and the actual hardware quality of the iPhone, it's demonstrably a very, very good audio player. And it's something that, as I said, it's probably not going to be as good in terms of pure signal to noise ratio measurements as really expensive audiophile DAPs. Sorry, but the thing is, when you go outside and there is background noise, those kind of extra enhancements in quality are not, in my opinion, going to be audible. They just won't, because the infinitesimal differences that you have in terms of total harmonic distortion, that kind of thing, I don't think are going to be noticeable when you're actually using the audio players as they should be used as portable music players. Now, if you're going to sit down in a library or in a really quiet place and you have your audio super high awesome audio player with you and you have your amazing like full-size headphones with you, maybe you might be able to hear a difference. But that's not how I use my music player, so I'm not really so enthused about getting the absolutely most expensive top-of-the-line audiophile player. And it's nice just to have one device in your pocket. The other problem I have with the iPhone is that it's only 64 gigs of storage. Ideally, what I'd love to do is just load this up with lossless tracks, but I don't have that amount of storage to do so. So I'd rather go to lossy 256K AAC, and we did those ABX test videos. I really can't tell the difference, so turns out I'm perfectly happy with it. Yes, Mike, I cannot hear you. I can definitely read your chat, but I cannot hear you coming through the speakers.
Testing,
I don't know what that would be.
Testing,
I think
testing.
there is.
We can hear each other, but Lachlan can't hear us.
Configuration of the sounds. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions. Oh, there we go. Yes. Oh, okay. So Arlene points out that he can hear the other guy. All right. Okay. There are two other people in the chat at the moment, so you might be able to hear them breathing or do that kind of thing. I actually cannot hear them, so that's very strange. I cannot work out why it's not working actually, because it should Should absolutely be working. So if it's not, it's a real mystery. No, it's not actually coming through on my side, so I can't actually hear anything. As always, clearly, like every hangout ever done, I'm prepared, obviously, and there's no technical difficulties or hitches, obviously, because I'm very good at that. Okay, so Lean also points out, since no improvements have been made regarding the GPU and the change from Wacom to N-Trig, what improvements should Microsoft have made in order for people getting eager to upgrade the device from Surface 2 and making it more lucrative? Okay, so to point out one thing, so far, people who have received i7 review units of the Surface Pro 3 have been reporting that the i7 review units, the GPU on the i7 review unit is the Intel HD 5000 and not the Intel HD 4400. So there is an upgrade on the GPU on the i7 units. For the i7 units, the HD 5000 is equivalent to the GPU on a MacBook Air, right? So it's not a huge jump, but it is better than the GPU. It should be about 10 to 15% better than the GPU in the Surface Pro 2, which is a good thing considering the screen is now larger and has the higher native resolution. Regarding the change from Wacom to N-Trig, I am still excited about that because the reduced parallax and the increased accuracy on screen edges, that's a really big problem on the Surface Pro 2 that actually makes it a little difficult to use in the stylus at times. Because as you can imagine, if it's not accurate on screen corners and the majority of interface elements on the Windows desktop environment are on the corners of the screen. So like things like closing the windows or the buttons or the files, if you're not accurately tracking the stylus when you need to click those buttons, it's kind of useless. So I am at least very much looking forward to the changes, and hopefully the new N-Trig digitizer is still really good. And I suspect they wouldn't have made this change unless they had very good reasons to do so. So the jury's still out. I would wait for that. Apart from that, I think there's a huge number of changes to the Surface Pro 3, which make me personally really excited about it. I mean, the decreased weight, the increased screen size, the new variable angle kickstand, the new web cameras. I mean, the web camera quality, what you're seeing now is actually my Surface Pro 2 webcam. It's actually not too bad because I'm getting a lot of sunlight, but I wouldn't mind a better webcam because the Surface 2 has one. Overall, I think it looks like a really exciting machine, and I think the majority of, I mean, I just saw The Verge do their review on the Surface Pro 3. It was quite positive. It wasn't like a 10 out of 10, and they still have their reservations because some people are still going to prefer the MacBook Air, but I feel like the Surface Pro 3 is the closest to getting the formula between tablet and laptop correct. So I'm definitely going to put in a pre-order. I'll be very excited to test it out when it arrives. Okay, Olusola asks, have you heard the UM3X? I actually have heard it quite many years ago when I was trying to decide between which earphone to buy. At that point, I ended up comparing the UM3X against the eSonics SM3, which I've lost in those years since then, which is very sad. But I thought the UM3X is good, but it sounded a little unnatural to me, just in terms of the kind of overall balance. So it wasn't my favorite listen. I felt it was very capable, but yeah, I did end up liking the SM3 a bit more. Nowadays, I wouldn't really go for a multi-balance armature earphone. I wouldn't necessarily be hugely enthusiastic about it. Oh, yes, okay. So, Hoa asks, hi Lachlan, is it possible to equalize cheap headphones on any device to compete with high-end headphones, like headphones that are $100 to $300 to be like $400 plus headphones? Also, have you ever had to listen to the Pioneer HD J2000? Basically, the answer to your question is no. You cannot equalize a headphone to sound better, to be like a better headphone. Okay, so to be clear, you can equalize a headphone so that if you go, oh, I don't like the amount of bass or the amount of treble, etc., etc., I don't like that mix of frequencies, I'm going to equalize it so that I have that reduced thing, right? It's like adjusting the colors on a picture. But what you cannot equalize, the majority of cheap headphones, for instance, problems with cheap headphones are things like the driver, the backwave reflection from the driver. So you imagine the sound that goes into your ear. When the driver moves, it actually creates a sound wave of equal force on the backside of the driver. If it comes into the earphone, the back of the headphone, and it bounces around, and it causes the entire headphone to resonate and produce additional echoes, which are distortion, because anything that's not in the original signal is distortion. And then those reflected signals come back into your ear. That's going to muddy up the sound. You cannot fix that with equalization, because that is part of the physical nature of that headphone. And that is also why headphones, high-end headphones, they use good damping materials in the back of the earphone cup so that it absorbs some of that backwave reflection. The other things about that is that they use higher quality materials which do not resonate as much. So in particular, things like metals or high-density plastics, things with high strength to weight ratios, you cannot equalize that to improve the physical characteristics of the headphone. Other things like the driver diaphragm. A driver diaphragm is only capable of producing so much sound at particular frequencies until a particular driver, as it moves, basically as you get higher to high frequencies and as the driver moves faster and faster, what you get is that the driver no longer moves as a single unit, which is what you want, and that's called perfect piston movement. When it starts moving very fast, basically the entire surface of the driver breaks up in the really fast movement. And then basically you get all these crazy sounds being produced, different harmonics at different frequencies, especially in the high frequency, because the driver is simply not capable of keeping up with the speed of the motion. And that is why in high-end headphones they use very, very special diaphragm materials. They use very, very special kind of physical aspects. So in the end, headphones, people don't think about this in these terms, I don't think, like regularly, but headphones are all based on physics. It's just the basic physics of making sound. You know, the controlling the movement of air and the diaphragm, they're basically mechanical objects, and you cannot equalize electronically things to compensate for things that are mechanical flaws inside the headphone. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. In relation to the HDJ2000 from Pioneer, I haven't heard that. If I had $400 to spend on an IEM, what would I get? I would get the H3, and I would not spend $400. So far, I wouldn't have necessarily heard anything in the $400 price category that I would unequivocally kind of recommend. There's the new UE900S, which is coming out at about $400, but there are some real issues with that at the moment. If you head over to the HeadFi thread and just look at that, it's kind of like I was looking forward to maybe buying a UE900S, but it is really confusing at the moment because it seems like that at the moment the model being sold in Japan and in Asian markets is different from the one being sold in the United States. There are revisions to the unit in the Asian channels which are not being sold in the United States channel, and I don't know exactly what's happened. I've reached out to some people at Logitech for comment, but I would hold off on buying that earphone until there's some clarity on what is actually going on there. Okay, so the next question is, as a music player, would an iPod Touch 5th generation be more capable than the Nexus 4? Would it be worth the investment? So, to be absolutely clear, the iPod Touch 5G, and I don't know how the Nexus 5 measures, but the iPod Touch 5G is basically the highest quality measured audio player, like consumer-grade audio player. I'm not talking about like fancy audio for $1,000 players, but it is the best consumer-grade audio player you can buy on the market according to the measurements. It is extremely clean, very, very low harmonic distortion levels, very, very low output impedance, everything you would want mechanically engineered in a music player. The question is it worth carrying around an extra device? I don't think so. Not necessarily, unless you're really like, I don't think that even the differences, because technically the iPod Touch 5G is better than the iPhone, I don't think the differences are going to be enough to warrant you carrying around an iPhone and an iPod. I don't think the differences are necessarily going to warrant, unless you have a really bad music player, if you have a really bad smartphone where the music output is actually been designed really badly, and it has noise and distortion and that kind of thing, or it's not driving your earphones. But I would really hesitate to buy dedicated music players just in order for improved sound quality. Unless you're kind of really married to a particular phone, but the music output on it is bad. Nowadays, smartphones generally have pretty decent music outputs. You can check out some of the measurements on various websites. There's Sumal. There's also Golden Ears. They do measurements of some of the audiophile players. I would hesitate to spend that extra money because it's going to be something that does less and it's more expensive. So, you know, that's my opinion on that. Okay, so yeah, and in relation to the same sort of question from Kenneth, is a DAC/amp even necessary for portable use? I don't think so. Yeah, unless you want to use some crazy headphone which simply cannot be driven out of a headphone output on a player, in which case, yeah, go ahead and spend your extra money. You can buy a fancy headphone and then buy the fancy audio player. Nowadays, the money for the manufacturers is clearly in headphones that can work with portable audio players, so that's what everyone is doing at the moment. So I would not necessarily be keenly enthused about spending that extra money. I spent the extra money on the ZX1 because I want to know, you know, I say all these things, but I want to know if it's true. So I spent this money. It's not a huge investment for me because if it's not good, I will sell it, right? And because I got a discount on it, I end up being much out of pocket when it comes time to sell it. So I get a chance to actually tell you guys about it. I get a chance to compare with, I got Thomas, my other friend Thomas. I have two good friends, Thomas. The other friend Thomas you've seen doing the ABX tests, he has a ZX1 as well. We're going to try and do some ABX tests with the ZX1 compared to some other music players because I think that's the only way you can actually tell if something is good or not as far as audio players go, because the differences are so minuscule. But yeah, no, I have my doubts. I've always had my doubts about like high-end audio players, especially in terms of how people use them nowadays. But I can't say that this is not a nice piece of hardware on itself. Just in terms of the context of how you use it daily, maybe not the most practical thing in the world. Okay, so...
You know, since Lachlan can't hear us, this is like Mr. Science Theater 3000.
I will see if Warren and Mike has anything to say. No, they do.
What is it, Warren?
Anything in particular. Warren asked about the H3. When you had the H3 in your ear, did you feel like it was struggling against you and trying to break its own seal? Sometimes, yes. What I'd find is that depending on the angle of entry into the ear, I would not get a proper seal on them. I would not necessarily get the proper seal. I think it has something to do with the way the ear guides are structured and stuff like that. I'm still trying to work out how to get the perfect seal with it. It does sound really good. Warren points out the message of the day is do not buy the ZX1. Yeah, the jury's still out on that, I think. For some people, this is still going to be a better quality output than their Android phone, and they might be really married to their Android phone and they don't want an iPhone. I always advocate get an iPhone for playing music. I think they're fine for that purpose. Okay, so I'm going to just take these last two questions. Hoa asks, would you buy a smartwatch? I have actually been quite interested in getting a smartwatch because I have a terrible tendency not to pick up my phone calls. And I would like to have a little thing around my wrist that tells me when I have a notification message. That would be really helpful. So I was considering getting one of those Pebble smartwatches. I'm waiting for the fancy steel version to come out in Australia. But I'm kind of interested in them. But yeah, I haven't tried one myself. Okay, so last question from Kenneth is, what's your wish list for the iPhone 6? So apparently the rumors are that there's going to be two sizes of the iPhone. My hopes and dreams and wants, wishes for the iPhone 6 are a bigger screen. Not so big that I cannot still use it in one hand, but I've used, for instance, the Moto X, the Motorola X phone. That is slightly bigger. I think it has like a 4.7-inch screen. I felt like that size is more appropriate for your hand. Things like the Xperia Z1 Compact and the Moto X and the Moto G, I feel like I'm really nicely suited for one-handed use. I still want to be able to use the phone in one hand. When I had the Nexus 5, I felt like I couldn't really comfortably reach all the user interface elements with my thumb on the same screen. So I would personally like to see a bigger screen. The other thing I would love to see in the iPhone 6 is NFC. Just because I have now increasingly a large number of NFC devices, particularly Sony cameras, where I would love to be able to use the NFC facility. So there's that. Apart from that, I'm pretty happy with the iPhone. I wish the fingerprint sensor worked a little more reliably because it's a little unreliable at times. And longer battery life would not hurt. I mean, it's not like this has bad battery life, but you can never argue with more battery life. Apart from that, I'm pretty happy with it. Pretty happy with the iPhone 5S. So yeah, I just want a bigger screen. Okay. Oh, thank you for the congratulations from Aline on being an uncle. Okay, so I'm just gonna just answer this one question because it's just one more question because I think this is helpful. Congrats on being an uncle. Now to my question, which headphones in-ear or on-ear would you recommend for the active person that stays on its place while running, is of good quality and rather affordable? Do you know what I really like and what I use now when I go running, because I do sprint training on the oval near where I live? I really like the Cost Porter Pro, which is a real classic. I like the Cost Porter Pro because it is extremely lightweight. It's an on-ear headphone. It doesn't isolate, which is important to me actually when it comes to fitness headphones. And I don't know your opinion on this, but I personally prefer non-isolating earphones because I don't want to be run over a car when I go running. So I want to hear what's going on about me. So the Cost Porter Pro is good in that respect. It has that headband. It actually fits quite securely because it's extremely lightweight. It's quite comfortable. The other thing is that I don't generally like running with in-ear earphones. When you go running with in-ear earphones, no matter how they're built, because when you run, your ear canal compresses, you will hear the silicon tip move inside your ear, and it's this constant thumping, or more like a thump, that you cannot get rid of because you're wearing in-ear earphones, and I would personally want to avoid that. So, yeah, not my favorite thing in the world. The Cost Porter Pro and it actually sounds quite good, surprisingly good for an earphone that's like, a headphone that's like 25 years, or 27 or something like years in terms of the design of that headphone. It's a very old design, but it's still practical. It still, I think, sounds good. It has this nice kind of warm sound, surprisingly open sound. I wouldn't wear it normally, necessarily, but it's cheap enough and it's good enough that if it breaks, it won't be such a great loss. So that's what I use for running. And the only thing I can complain about with the Cost Porter Pro is that the cables will kind of move around and pull on and pull a little. It's not a huge deal. That's what I use in terms of fitness nowadays. But anyway, thanks to everyone who has joined the Hangout. Thanks for all your questions. As always, if you want to know about future Hangouts, you can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/LachlanLikesAthing, on Twitter @LachLikesAthing. I'm trying to do this as a semi-regular thing. I'm really excited because today I'm probably going to go see my sister's daughter, who's my niece, I think. I always get those terms confused. Bizarrely, I can never get those things. Right, but at least she's my niece. I'm not absolutely sure. Let me know in the comments if that's actually not true at all. But anyway, yeah, thanks for joining in and enjoy the rest of your day.